Welcome to Biology, My Passion. I am Soumya Harikrishna. We are going to learn the chapter Tissues. Let us start with the chapter. Now, if we define tissues, tissues are a group of cells that are similar in structure and or work together to achieve a particular function. That means when a group of cells come together and they perform a common function, they are called tissues. So, if they are performing a common function, they should have a common structure also. So, we can say tissues are group of cells that are similar in structure and function. Now, the next question arises. Are plants and animals made of same type of tissues? The answer is no. Why is our answer no? Because plants and animals have got certain differences with respect to their growth pattern and with respect to their body organization. If we analyze that, we can understand that they cannot have same type of tissues. So what are the major differences between plants and animals? First of all, plants are stationary or fixed, whereas animals move around in search of food, mates and shelter. Have you ever seen a plant going from one place to another? They move, but they do not have locomotion. Means they don't change their position. So, if they want to stand throughout their life in a particular region or a place, what do they need? They need more cells giving them support. They don't have a skeletal system like animal cells. So, they prefer to have more of dead cells so that they can get maximum support but without spending much energy, because the maintenance requirement of dead cells are very less. In animal cells, they move around and they have mostly living cells because they need a lot of energy. Another difference is with respect to their growth pattern. Plants show indefinite growth. That means they grow throughout their life. Whereas in animals, growth is definite. That means after a particular time period, they don't grow in their life, but rather they switch to their reproductive maturity. So if the plants have to have indefinite growth, are they showing uniform growth? No, we can see that some parts of the plants are growing more than the other parts. You can see one branch is taller than the other, or one branch has many bifurcations than the other, or one branch is having more flowers or fruits than the other. It is not uniform, but it is localized. It is happening to only certain regions of the plant. It's not growing throughout. Whereas when it comes to animals, are we showing non-uniform growth? Like one hand is growing more than the other, or one ear is growing more than the other? It looks weird, right? So we have uniform growth. Whole body is growing proportionately. That means it is non-localized. It's not to a particular region the growth is happening. Entire body the growth is happening and it is uniform. So because of all these differences, plants and animals should have different types of tissues. Now we have to learn plant tissues in detail. Plant tissues are classified into two types. First type is called a meristematic tissues and the second type is called a permanent tissues. Now we have to study each one in detail. So before we start learning tissues, different types of tissues, let me remind you, whenever we are learning a tissue, we have to learn three aspects in detail. The structure of cells present in the tissue, the location and function. Now let us discuss meristematic tissues in detail. Meristematic tissues are actually the tissues which are constituting the growth of the plant. Just now we told growth occurs only at certain points in plants, or they are having localized growth. So here, where are they growing? Wherever meristematic tissues are present. So meristematic tissues are the growing tissues of plants. And depending on the region where these tissues are present, different types of meristematic tissues are there. So based on the position, meristematic tissues are of three types. First type is called a apical meristem. Apical means what? Apex or the tip. Next is intercalary meristem. Third is lateral meristem or cambium. So apical meristem means at the tip. So these meristems are found at the growing tips of stems and roots. That means extreme tip of stem as well as roots we can find apical meristem. So if they are dividing, so these cells are continuously dividing in order to add to the growth of the plant, or new cells are being added. Naturally the height is increasing. So we can say apical meristems contribute towards the height of the plant, or it helps in the growth of the plant, that is by increasing the height. The second type of meristem is called the intercalary meristem. So intercalary meristems are located near the node. What are nodes? If you look at a plant, you know there are certain regions where the leaves are starting. So the point of origin of leaf, that part is little swollen than the other part of the stem. So that point of origin of leaf is called a node. So in the nodal region we can see some kind of meristematic tissues. They are called the intercalary meristem. So there also they divide. So ultimately they are adding to the length of the stem, or we can say that the stem elongation happens or the growth is happening height wise. The third type of meristem is called a lateral meristem or cambium. Lateral meristem is seen to the side of the plant. Lateral, the word meaning is side or periphery. So when they are dividing, it is sidewise. So a thin plant is becoming a very thick plant, or a herbaceous plant becoming a woody trunk. It is because of this effect of lateral meristem or cambium. So they are found at the periphery of the stem or root. So what is their function? They add to the girth of the plant, or girth means what? Diameter of the plant is increased. Another important point to remember here is what are the characteristics of meristematic tissues? Because I told these cells are in a continuous state of division, so they are different from the other types of tissues in plants. So the cells in meristematic tissues are active because they are dividing continuously. They don't know anything. They just keep on dividing. And since they are dividing, they are active, they have dense cytoplasm. Lot of chemical reactions are taking place, making new proteins, new DNA replication, all these processes are happening. So for that many chemicals are required, so they have dense cytoplasm. And they have thin cellulose walls. We know if the wall is thick, the division is difficult. And also thickening of wall takes place at a later stage of maturation. But here the cell is not going to that stage. They have prominent nuclei because all the activities are mainly happening within the nucleus. So nucleus is also very prominent. And they lack vacuoles. Vacuoles are absent. In cell chapter we learn vacuoles store things for the cell. Here is there anything to store? No, they have to divide again and again. So they don't have vacuoles also. So this is a very important question. What are the characteristics of meristematic tissues? Now we will learn about permanent tissues in plants. But how are permanent tissues formed? They are formed basically from the meristematic tissues. Meristematic tissues, after a stage of division, they keep on dividing. So when new cells are forming, the other meristematic tissues will stop dividing. They take up a permanent shape, size and function. Then they are called a permanent tissue. So meristematic tissues are actually getting converted into permanent tissues. Then that process is called a differentiation. Differentiation is nothing but the transformation of meristematic cells into permanent tissues. Meristematic tissues were only dividing cells, but when they become permanent tissues, they get a proper shape, size and a particular function. For example, some of them will be developing into leaf cells. Some of them then take up the function of photosynthesis. Some of them will be becoming vascular bundles. They take up the function of conduction of different substances in the body. Now when we see permanent tissues, they are also different types. Simple permanent tissues and complex permanent tissues. So as the name suggests, simple and complex. Simple means they have only one type of cell. Look at this picture. Here you can see several beads. Their size may be slightly different, but they are of the same kind. Every single bead is similar to the other one. Whereas in the second picture you are seeing collection of beads. Some are spherical, some are flat, some are rectangular, some are elongated. So different types of beads are there. So tissues are also like this. If the first category, if all the cells are alike, suppose each bead is considered as a cell. All cells are similar in a collection of cells or group of cells called tissues, then that tissue is considered simple. There is no complexity, they are all alike. Whereas in the second case, complex tissues, you find cells of different size. But basically, they are coming together to perform a common function. Structure may be same, but their shape is different. So they ultimately help in bringing about a particular function in plants. So hope you understood simple and complex permanent tissues. Simple tissues have only one type of cells or all cells are similar, whereas complex tissues have different types of cells in it. Now we will study in detail simple permanent tissues. Simple permanent tissues again divided into three types: parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma. You need to be very familiar with these words. How can you get familiarized with these words? Only by repetition. Okay, so repeat after me: parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma. Okay, so first learn the names properly, pronounce it several times to make it familiar, then learn the characteristics. So we know these are simple permanent tissues. What does that mean? They all have the same type of cells in them. Parenchyma are the most common type of simple tissues. That means they are found in almost all parts of the plant. They are found in the root, they are found in the stem, they are found in the leaf, they are found in the fruit. Or we can say the basic ground tissue or the basic plant body is made up of parenchyma. Parenchyma cells have unspecialized cells with thin cell walls. Because their cell wall is thin and they are unspecialized, because they can get specialized into different parts of the plant. And they are living cells. They are loosely arranged with intercellular spaces. They generally store food. Okay, so these are the characteristics of parenchyma. They are the most common type. They are not very specialized to perform a function. They do various functions. They have thin cell walls. They are living cells. The structure of parenchyma cells, we can see they are thin walled. Okay, for example, like this, very thin walled cells with a thin cell wall. Suppose if I am drawing the other cells without the detailing, it will be like this. Many cells, some of them will be like this, or they can be elongated cells like we saw in the case of onion cells when we studied the fundamental unit of life, like this. So different shaped cells are there. Okay, sometimes they are very elongated, like forming inside the leaves. Okay, so different shapes are there. And they have thin cell wall. There is a nucleus and there is a central vacuole and a cytoplasm is also present. Okay, these are all living cells. Here you can see space in between the cells. They are not very tightly packed, but cells are there. That is called the intercellular space. That means the space between the cells is called a intercellular space. So parenchyma cells are arranged with the intercellular space. There are two different types of parenchyma cells. One is called a CLERENCHYMA. That means if the parenchyma has got chlorophyll in them, we call it as CLERENCHYMA. In CLERENCHYMA cells, there are chloroplast present. It's a type of plastid containing the green pigment chloroplast. So usually we represent chloroplast as a single layer of dots to the side of the cell. Okay. So they are parenchyma containing chlorophyll and they perform the photosynthesis because they have chlorophyll to trap sunlight, so they can carry out photosynthesis. Parenchyma means the parenchyma cells, if they are arranged with a lot of air space in them, then they are called a parenchyma. So here are lots of space present, so air can be trapped there in these spaces. So large air cavities are there. Where are they present? They are present in the aquatic plants and help the aquatic plants to float. That buoyancy is produced by this air present. We know when we are going into water, if we don't know swimming, we take the tubes which are filled with the air to keep us float. The same way here also, the air trapped in these air spaces make the aquatic plants float in water. The second type of the simple tissue is collenchyma. So collenchyma cells are also living just like parenchyma cells. These cells have elongated, their shape is little elongated, and they have thick cell wall. The cell wall is thick but not uniformly thick all the sides. They are thick only at the corners. So if I show that in the picture, when you are drawing, you have to draw round cells for collenchyma, but each cell touching the other cells, but only at one point, not throughout. Without leaving any gap, one cell should touch the other. So in this case, you can see the cells are touching each other. So if you draw like this, in the gaps, if you draw the thickened walls like here. Okay. So if you look at this particular cell, you can see only corners are thickened. This yellow color is the thickening. So corners are thickened. Okay. So they do not have much intercellular space. So they have very little intercellular space. And what is their function? They provide flexibility to plants. We can say some trees are swaying in the wind. Or if you want to pluck a fruit from the top of the tree, sometimes we jump and catch hold of that branch, bend it down, pluck it, and then release, it will go back. Okay, so to a certain extent, we can bend the plant without breaking it. It is because of the collenchyma. Usually, suppose this is a branch. Under the stem surface, you can see a layer of collenchyma. This is providing flexibility to plants. It allows the bending of various plants of parts like tendrils also. Have you seen structures like this? Clinging structures are there in plants, very thin and coiled. They are called tendrils. Or some plants are climbers. They have weak stems, so they are climbers. It is all because of the presence of collenchyma. And apart from that, they provide mechanical support also because they have corners thick, so they can provide support. Where do we find them? Found in the leaf stalks below the epidermis. So stalk means, suppose here is the leaf. So under that stalk, below the epidermis, just now I told, there you can see the presence of epidermis. Next we have sclerenchyma. So here these tissues make the plant hard and stiff. Typical example is husk of coconut. If you have seen the outer part of coconut, it is fibrous. So if you take one fiber and pull, it is very difficult to break it. It's very strong. So we use it for making coir, rope, etc., where a lot of strength is needed. And these cells are dead. So this is a difference from parenchyma and collenchyma. They both were living. Here it is dead. And these cells are long and narrow with the thick walls due to deposition of lignin and less internal space because of the thickening. Thick walls like this. So their narrow lumen they have because inside there is less space because of this thickening. Okay, so this is the border where they have narrow channels or pits through which the transport can occur. Here is the lumen. Lumen means the inner space which is very narrow due to the deposition of this thick wall, and this thick deposition is due to a chemical called a lignin. We are going to study three chemicals in the plant tissues. The first one is lignin, which is making the cell wall of this sclerenchyma very thick. So if you take the cross section, means cut section of this, we will be seeing this way. Hexagonal cells. So this is the cross-sectional view, and what I have drawn as a long fiber is the longitudinal or vertical view of this. And they are present in the stem around vascular bundles. Vascular bundles means they are the conducting tissues in plants, and in the veins of leaves. What are veins of leaves? You know, if there is a leaf, it will have lot of this midrib, right? and a major vein. These are the veins of leaves. So around them also you will find some sclerenchyma. And in the hard covering of seeds and nuts, we know the parts are becoming hard and stiff due to sclerenchyma. So basically what is the function? They provide strength to the plants. Now let us discuss another tissue in plants, that is epidermis, which is the protective covering of the plant. Just like how skin is protecting our body, plant body is covered by thin layer of epidermis. Epidermis is a single layered structure. Only one layer, thick flat kind of cells are there. They are continuous without intercellular space. Imagine if there are spaces in between the cells, then the microbes and other things can enter the cell. So the function of this epidermis is to protect, so there is no intercellular space. And they are flat cells. They are very thin and flat. They are on the aerial parts of the plant, that is especially if the plant is living in a very dry habitat without water, they will have a waxy layer to prevent water loss. This layer is called, a waxy layer is called a cuticle, and it is made up of another chemical called a cutin. So this is the second chemical we are studying. Lignin, making the wall of sclerenchyma thick, was the first one. Cutin, forming the cuticle or waxy layer over the plants in dry conditions, is the second one. They provide protection against loss of water, mechanical injury, and invasion by parasitic fungi. So these are all functions of epidermis. Let us see some structures found on the epidermis. If it is leaf epidermis, we will find small pores on the epidermis. They are called stomata. So stomata are enclosed by two kidney-shaped cells. These cells have nucleus and also they have chloroplast in them. So these cells are called guard cells. So from the name itself, guard means what? Protecting, right? So this stomata is this pore. This pore is protected by this guard cells. Guard cells have very thick wall inside. And surrounding this you will find the epidermal cells. They don't have chloroplast. So what are the functions of stomata? The first function is exchange of gases with atmosphere. For photosynthesis, plants have to take in carbon dioxide, and after photosynthesis oxygen is liberated, right? So gaseous exchange is taking place with the atmosphere through stomata. Another function of stomata is transpiration, means the loss of water in the form of water vapor from the plants. Excess water if there, it has to go out. How will it go? In the form of water vapor. How can it go out? Through the stomata. So these are the functions of stomata, very important. Another structure that you will find as a modification on the epidermis is root hair. Suppose this is a root of a higher plant. From that you will see fine hair-like extensions. Sometimes on the carrots you can see fine hairs. So carrot is a root modification. So those extensions of the hair-like structures are the root hair. So root hair is actually meant for water absorption. In smaller classes you learn roots absorb water for plants, but to be specific, root hairs absorb water. Since they are large in number, they can increase the surface area of absorption, so large amount of water can be absorbed. So we learn three adaptations on the epidermis. One is the presence of cuticle to prevent water loss. Second, stomata for gaseous exchange and transpiration. And third, we learned the root hairs for absorption of water from the soil. Now coming to general function of epidermis, the epidermis is for mainly protection, right? Protection, and also it prevents the invasion of microbes or the parasitic fungi. It also prevents excess water loss and prevent mechanical injury. Hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please like, share and subscribe to my channel Biology My Passion.